Today on Across the Fence, get a bird's eye view of life in Vermont and make tweeting fun again. It's time for Bird Notes with Mark LaBarr from Audubon, Vermont. Hello, Vermont. Well, one, did you notice our very cute new branded Bird Notes intro?
I saw that. That looks great.
I know. Isn't that pretty cool? Okay, well, so here's a question. Did you participate in the Audubon Christmas bird count? Have you been waiting with bated breath to find out what we learned about our feathered friends? If so, then you're in luck because, obviously, you just heard him. Mark LaBarr is with us, and he's ready to bring us all up to speed. So, Mark, thank you for being here.
So it's interesting. You know, you call it the Christmas bird count.
Right.
The Audubon Christmas bird count. And originally it was started, this was the 126th year of the count. So it was started back in 1900. A fellow by the name of Frank Chapman decided, used to be you'd go out on Christmas Day and you would shoot birds. He decided to count them instead.
I love that. That's a good change.
And so the Christmas bird count has arrived from that, and Audubon has been coordinating that for years. But it has changed its name over time. Some counts will drop the Audubon. Oftentimes counts will now use the winter bird count to be more inclusive, you know, and not have a necessarily religious thing with it.
Right.
So there are a number of different names with it, but the protocols are pretty much the same.
And they're all organized by Audubon, regardless of whether or not you say Audubon. They're the central repository for all the information?
For all the information, correct.
Got it. Okay.
Some organizations, you know, will post where people can connect with their count circle heads, which I'll talk about. Other organizations like Vermont Center for Eco Studies do the same. So the word gets out there for the birding community that these 2 weeks, mid-December to the first week of January, is when people go out and
see what they see.
See what they see.
See what they see. Keep tabs on the local bird life. Register the counts.
In a 24-hour period. So some people will not only go out during the day, but they'll go owling the night before to try to find the owls that are there. And basically the way the count is designed is there are what are called count circles.
Okay.
And today what I thought, because it was posted on the listserv, we would talk about one of those circles, which is the Champlain Islands count.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about it, yeah.
And so here you can see, and it's a little faint on the edge there, but you can see the Champlain Islands is the center of the count.
Yep.
And the circle actually extends all the way over into New York and then all the way over into western Vermont.
Okay.
And so this is a 15-mile radius of this circle, and the idea is to get out and to try to see and count as many birds and species as you can.
So when did this end? They started in mid-December and it went up until just the beginning of January?
Yeah. So the count is open, and oftentimes it's broken down into a count day when everybody goes out and does the official count. But then they'll count other things during that count week period if they can differentiate.
And there's leaders. You said there's leaders.
So each one of these circles has a point person that you can reach out to, and you can get on the count. So you can go and do it by yourself. You can sit in front of your feeder. You can go out with a bunch of people.
Right, and we talked a little bit about it before Christmas, but this time around too, you mentioned the listserv. I always loved listservs. Those used to be my favorite thing about email, right? You know, getting listservs.
So there is a listserv where people can post all of their sightings and have discussions. It's monitored through UVM. There's also a birding Facebook page and all sorts of resources.
Could you still get involved with that at this time of year, outside of the count?
Oh, the listserv, yes.
Listserv, yes. Okay. All right.
But you'd have to go. I think if you Googled UVM bird listserv, there would be instructions for getting on
UVM birds listserv.
Yes, since they house it there, and all of this data is collected and has been collected, and it gives you know, it's done by community scientists. And it is designed to collect information on these winter birds.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we're here in Vermont, so we see winter birds.
I know, I want to see some.
They'll do the count,
yeah,
you know, throughout North America, Canada, Central America, South America. There's some outliers in some other countries. So what people report can be vastly different between different count circles.
Okay, good. Well, let's see some of what the findings were this year.
Yeah, so it was, you know, it's always interesting what you're going to come up with.
Yeah.
because there are the usuals, not the catbirds, the chickadees, the woodpeckers,
Right.
you know, things of that
Kind of
nature,
usual
nuthatches.
suspects, yes.
But then you get birds like this, the gray catbird. Again,
I know, and you love catbirds.
I do love catbirds, but I was in Belize at the beginning of December, right when this count was happening, and there were catbirds all over the place down there, because that's usually where they winter. So this bird, for whatever reason, stuck around, probably feeding on berries and stuff like
Okay,
that.
wait, I'm going to see if I can use does this mean that he's a migrant? No?
Technically it is a migrant.
Okay,
and
but there was another name too for like the birds that stay around where they're not supposed to be there. Is that migrants?
That would be residents.
Okay, all right.
And then we'll talk a little bit
All
about
right,
eruptive
okay.
species probably next week. So
Okay.
this catbird may have left and headed south. We don't know, or whether it's here for the winter.
Okay.
But on
We have a confused catbird.
December 4th, this bird was, a catbird was seen on this count. So that was a first time ever for this particular
Wow.
count.
That's pretty cool. Okay, how about what do we have next?
Because it's the island counts, you have a lot of open water. This year they had a lot of ice, so some numbers, like waterfowl numbers, might have been down a little bit, but they had 17 bald eagles that they
amazing.
sighted.
And that's
within their
unusual.
count
That's a high
circle.
number.
So bald eagles have been increasing in Vermont now for a number of years. When I used to do the winter bird bald eagle count, if we got above 20 for the entire Lake Champlain side of Vermont, that was a big number.
I saw one in October.
Yeah, so they're becoming, very prevalent across the landscape.
Okay. Now, what else do we got? We have I think we have a woodpecker.
Yeah, so this is this is the red-bellied woodpecker. Now, there is a red-headed woodpecker, so not to be confused, a full red, and this bird does show a reddish
tiny
belly.
little reddish belly.
Yeah.
Yes, I see it.
So this is a bird that is pretty new to Vermont and has, its range has moved up north, often seen in the Champlain Valley, but can be seen in other places. And so this bird, which, 20, 30 years ago we wouldn't have seen, they picked up 27 of them on the Champlain, the islands count.
All right. Next, we've got a northern flicker.
Another woodpecker, and this is one of our migratory woodpeckers.
Wait, this is also called a woodpecker?
Well, it's called a flicker.
Oh, it's called a flicker.
But it is a woodpecker.
But it is a woodpecker.
And
okay.
it's a little different because
beautiful
it
too.
often feeds on the ground as well. But this
Okay.
is one of our migratory woodpeckers. And it seems to be finding enough food, especially in this cold December that we've had, that it was stuck around and picked up on the 14th. Now, again, birds have the ability to cover large, crosses of ground in order to get to warmer places. So whether this bird left the next day or is planning to stay the entire
Love this.
winter
They
is
don't
tough.
file their travel plans.
They don't.
No.
No, they don't.
Okay, and then we have a junco.
So juncos, these are a pretty common bird that we see, mostly at our feeders. In Vermont, they breed at higher elevations. They'll do, sometimes drop down to lower locations, and this is often a ground feeder that you find underneath feeders. So again, when people are sitting there watching their feeders, they can count the high count of juncos.
Yep.
And they had 457 of them on the count
Wow,
this
that's
year.
a lot. And then how
So-
about these cardinals? Because we've got some cardinals too.
And cardinals, everybody loves the cardinals.
Yeah.
Again, this is a bird, in areas of this count circle, you've got areas like St. Albans and some city type of areas and urban areas, suburban areas, and you have a lot of feeders, and so you have a lot of cardinals.
Very beautiful birds.
They, always striking when they're out there, especially the male. And they were able to pick 205 of them up over the course of the day in the islands.
Quick question, because we have just a tiny bit more time.
Yeah.
And we still have a bunch of rare birds to get to.
Yep.
But did they pair together? Like oftentimes I feel like I see a male and a female cardinal together.
They will often stay in a loose pair bond.
Okay.
I've heard of winter times where people will see, upwards of 15 cardinals in one location. Since they don't migrate, their pair bonds can stay a little bit stronger, and they'll potentially defend a territory and get started earlier.
Right.
So.
All right, well, let's get into these rare birds because we have about 4 minutes left.
Okay.
So rare birds.
So these are birds that have been seen on this count, but aren't seen regularly.
Okay.
One is the short-eared owl. This is a bird of open areas, grasslands, another count circle further south that includes Dead Creek Wildlife Management Area. This is a bird you can often see in those big open plains. hay fields down there.
Good looking owl.
Yeah, and it flies very low and feeds that way, and so they picked one up in the count this year.
Okay.
Another one, a species that is what we call eruptive, and this is a species, the snowy owl, that sometimes we see them and we'll get large number of them. Sometimes we don't. So they found one. It hasn't been a boom year for snowy owls. The last boom year was resulted from, I gather they had a lot of lemmings up there, so there were a lot of young owlets.
Okay.
And got a little crowded, so we see them here in Vermont.
All right, how about the sapsucker?
So again, this is a migratory bird. This is a bird that usually leaves us, but it will stick around. Food source, food is the primary objective here. And so picking up a sapsucker is not necessarily unusual, but it's a good bird. It's an unusual bird for this wintertime count.
And then how about this merlin? This is a fantastic looking bird.
So this is our smallest falcon. It's a tiny little falcon, which we don't see much in Vermont. It shows up, oftentimes on golf courses. It likes pine trees.
Okay.
And so this was a good bird for those folks to find because it can move around and will move south. And it's not a common bird to begin with, so to find it on the bird count is great.
Yeah.
And the last one is a white-crowned sparrow. So this is a species that nests further north of us.
Okay.
We usually see it during migration, both in the spring and the fall. And but we don't necessarily see it in those, the summer or the winter.
Okay.
So again, this is not a bird that hasn't been picked up on this count before, but they found one this year. And knowing birders, especially in winter.
Well, we're beginning to be on the cusp, and we're starting to get more bird activity, right?
Right. So but this count, and there's another one coming up in February called the Great Backyard Bird Count, which are different ways that community scientists can contribute to the scientific knowledge of winter birds. As well as just get out. It can be Christmas bird count or winter bird count can be a very social event. Usually,
we all need these things.
At the end of each count, the people get together and reveal what they've seen and what they got, because there's different groups that go out.
So maybe if you participated in a circle, you are already starting to plan your activities to get together and compare notes and talk about everything. Mark, this has been fantastic. Okay, obviously we're going to have lots of new things to talk about in February too.
Yes.
Can't wait. All right. Well, remember, Mark loves bird questions and prides himself on being able to provide an answer with or without an image, though if your question is accompanied by a picture, so much the better. I wonder if you got any stumpers, because I told last time people to make them hard for you. In any case, Mark's contact info is right there on the screen. And thank you, Vermont, as ever, for joining me. Thank you for learning and exploring with me, and thanks to the team that makes Across the Fence possible. I'm Amy Finley. This is Across the Fence. Come back and let's learn and explore again tomorrow.